If you need your pitch changed, well, NordVPN can doctor any surface to a new location so that your IP address is set for you to win. Want to watch a game on a free stream in another hemisphere? Give NordVPN the ball. Or if you just want to watch a clip on social media that a cricket board won't allow, promote NordVPN to pinch hit. So if you need a VPN, go Nord. Use nordvpn.com/Kimber to get a 2-year contract with a discount, plus 4 extra months and gifts in some markets. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. Protect your computer like a bowler protects the boundaries in the death overs with nordvpn.com/Kimber today.
Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Overthrows podcast. And, I'm Behram Kazi, of course you know. You can find me at Def Mango on Twitter. And with me is Jarrod Kimber, who is with us here as always. This was actually a scheduled live show for Bangladesh versus South Africa, the Test series. It was supposed to be a preview, but South Africa has defeated Australia in a World Cup semi-final in cricket, which is something that I thought that I wouldn't see in the foreseeable future, at least. And that's just really shocking, isn't it, Jarrod? Particularly when you think about the women's game and just how more powerful Australia are as a unit and historically have been.
It's incredible, isn't it? I think Sankalp has said here, but do you think Australian women's defeat is a one-off, or are they getting invincible? I think if you've been following me and Behram for a while, we've been saying that we're not sure they're quite the all-conquering power that they have been. So I think there's an element of that that is coming through. I think it's too early to say, but the fact that there isn't a single one of the three favorites in the final does hint at an air of parity. I mean, it's hard for me to say because if you would have told me that these teams aren't in the final and you would have asked me which team is in the final, I would have said Sri Lanka, and they finished last. So I feel like that's parity. But then the other part of that equation is that I still don't think West Indies are particularly good, and they might be in the final. So, maybe it's just one of those tournaments where things go, and Australia and England kind of lost important games, and in World Cups that's how it goes. But there's no doubt if you're going to have South Africa, New Zealand, West Indies in the final, whichever one of those, if they're going to be the teams in the final, it is hard not to see this as something new and exciting. So I'm hoping it's not a one-off. But I think we have seen, Annabelle Sutherland and Megan Shute were probably the only two bowlers in that chase where I was like, I feel 100% confident in them. Whereas I think in previous times, you're just like, it doesn't matter who they throw the ball to, right? Like they're just going to beat you. But you got Darcy, who they were terrified of bowling wides and no balls, who couldn't bowl in the power play anymore. I don't think it took a wicket this tournament, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure they picked their best spinners, if we're being honest. I think they picked a lot of all-rounder spinners. And so they didn't maybe have the specialist spinners that they could have had. They batted in a timid way, certainly compared to South Africa. I think it's a valid question. We're only going to know what happens next time. I mean, realistically, I still think India, England, and Australia have really good sides. And if you ask me who's the best women's side in the world, I'd say probably is still out of those three, right? So none of them are here. Maybe that's just the tournament we're at. But how brilliant is this for women's cricket? It's not been a good tournament in terms of close games. It's not been a good tournament in terms of fielding, right? But in terms of upsets and who is in the final, it's about as good as you can get, I think.
Yeah, right the way, like all the way through, actually, with the upsets. And I mean, I remember when we used to discuss the Women's T20 World Cup, I had that hot take that Australia won't win it because they were dropping the odd game, if you remember, right? But I had England and India as my next favorites and England as my hot favorites, right? That's where I was at, and none of those teams have made it. And the England one was just the funniest. They lost one game. They just lost to the West Indies, and they were out. And
it's funny because someone sent me a message going, I hope you're going to rinse Behram for his picks of England and India now that they're out of the final. Just someone in one of the comments. And I was ready to do that. And now Australia are out there, and I only picked one side. So I've got, I suppose I liked England as well. But Australia, I just thought Australia would win. So it's like, if anyone picked a final between South Africa and West Indies or South Africa and New Zealand, I don't know what the odds would have been. That must be like 50-1 or 100-1.
I don't even know. When it comes to odds, I'd be really curious to know what the odds would be for Australia not to win after, the semi-finalist had been decided. because everyone would have thought that Australia would win. So
I can
that would
tell
be
you,
a very
I don't know what
interesting one.
I don't know what they were to not to win, but I can tell you what they were to actually win the whole thing. They were 130. So there were 4 teams in, and I think New Zealand were like 8th, and the other 2 teams were obviously further out. I think if I'm remembering that, and Australia were 130. So not quite unbackable, but basically unbackable. I think 130 is about 75% chance of winning. And when that's pretty high up there, right? Like I looked at that because I thought to myself, well, if they're 150 or 160, I might slip a couple of pounds on here because that's a decent bet. And I looked at it, I was like, that's way too short. I didn't think they'd look. I still thought they'd make the final, but I was like, to win 2 games in a row. I'm not sure there's any team in this tournament I've looked at and been like, this team has always been in form and playing brilliantly all the way through. And so, I don't want to say like, oh, I thought this was a chance.
England was that team, Jarrod. England was the team that was looking brilliant. It was in form more so all the way through.
Wasn't there a game though? And it was early on. Who was England is in the same draw as South Africa, yeah?
Yes.
The England chase against South Africa. I said at the time, I did not feel that they had played very well. And I think if you go back and South Africa had fielded better in that game, I think they would have rolled England. England win that game with about 3 balls to go. And there was do you know what I mean? So all the way through, all the major sides, I never felt as comfortable with them as I certainly did before the tournament, where I was like, only 3 teams can win. What are we talking about here? Right?
I mean, we said that the whole equal prize money thing is a hoax because only the best teams will make it. And now someone's going to pocket big time.
That is awesome to think about. One of these teams is going to take a huge chunk. And don't the runners-up get a nice chunk too, Behram?
Yes, they do. It's very sizable, right? It's in the millions.
It's so important. It's so important from that point of view for this next game between New Zealand and West Indies, right? We are talking about, legitimately a chance for one of these teams to change their financial future, right? The players.
Yeah.
Dougal says the Kimber's favorite Mooney screwed up. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a great innings from her. Again, I think there's a few players in this tournament that I just felt like never really got going, and perhaps she was one of them. But to be fair, I don't think she was on her own today, but yeah, she went deep into that innings. And we'll go through it. I know that you watched some of the first innings, and I obviously watched the second one. But Marizanne Kapp bowling early on, I think. Certainly
she bowled like I think 3 overs in the power play, right? And she went for nothing, which she's made a habit out of, and got a wicket. So, we were also discussing in one of the crick picks, how is she past her prime? Well, she's just inspired her team to a final, right? A second consecutive final, by the way.
Yeah.
And they've exacted their revenge on Australia from the previous finals. There's so many subplots here. It's so exciting.
Without some of their better players, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No Shabnam Ismail.
In development, right? So to do that, but yeah, Marizanne, it's funny. I looked at her numbers, and her numbers have kind of held up, but she has been bowling maybe slightly softer overs of recent times because she's getting older and she's not as fast as she used to be, but she's still so skillful. So I thought that played a big part. But actually, it was kind of after the power play. I can't remember how many overs, but there was a bunch of overs where Australia scored like 2 and 3 and 4, and I I think I might have been listening to TMS at that stage. And I remember thinking to myself, either this wicket's really tough, or they are just they've put themselves into a position here that they don't necessarily need to be in. And they just got themselves a little bit behind. And I think it was, I can't remember the overs, Behram, but maybe it was the 11th or 12th overs. They scored 8 and 9. And that was the point where I was like, okay, so here comes the hammer. The hammer never came really until Phoebe Litchfield comes in. And what were they, 4 or 5 wickets down when she came in? Like she came in late.
She was batting at 6, and I was like, seriously, like Phoebe Litchfield out of all like batters, your prodigy, the replacement of Meg Lanning going into the future. She's batting at 6. And Elise Perry scored 31 of 23 or something. Those numbers might look good on a scorecard, but she knocked it around for far too late, right?
She waited to the end, yeah?
When Phoebe came, I remember, Australia were under 100 and they had 3.1 overs to go. So she hit a boundary and they all of a sudden had more than 100. And then I'm thinking, okay, maybe if they play well, 130, and they did that. Phoebe literally scored, 16 of 9 or something. But I feel like that was the only innings, really, because Mooney was going at run a ball.
I think when Phoebe came in. I think they had 4 or 5 boundaries in the innings, and she hit 3 boundaries and 9 balls. I might slightly have the numbers off, but I was counting because I was like, where are these boundaries coming from? And if you think about Ash Gardner's a hitter behind, you know, they had Annabelle Sutherland and Sophie Molyneux also available to them. Like they've left a lot of batting on the table, considering.
You also mentioned that they didn't have like specialist spinners. Alana King could have really done well in these conditions, I feel, you know?
I also agree with that. So I thought they definitely left runs. So I think if you look at my tweet, I said that they were under par. I thought the problem for South Africa was Annabelle Sutherland under lights and the fact that Megan Shute plays, right? But Annabelle Sutherland has been so unplayable under lights. And I can tell you this for a fact. I was watching the odds of South Africa go up and up and up. And I was waiting for Annabelle to come on and bowl. And I walked away from my computer on my TV for 1 second. And that was when she came on. And I think she took a wicket with like her first or second ball. I was like, oh, okay. So I've missed out on my easy Jasprit Bumrah, Sophie Eccleston style bet of just backing the best bowler in the best conditions here. And she gets that wicket. But she goes for runs in that over, which I think is really, really crucial, right? She goes for runs. But the bigger issue is, you know, you have a look at Australia's bowling compared to South Africa's. So in South Africa's bowling, no one goes at over 8 runs and over. Malaba, who's probably been their best bowler all tournament.
Exactly. But if you look at their bowling, Jarrod, if you look at it, all the wickets come from their best bowlers. Marizan takes 1 for 24. Khaka has the best figures of the night amongst both teams at 2 for 24. And then also, Malaba didn't really hold the economy well or whatever, but she got a wicket, right?
Yeah.
So
I think
their 3 best bowlers did their job.
Yeah, but it's the other 3 bowlers I'm not more interested in, but the fact that the other 3 bowlers held up, that's one thing that hasn't always been happening for them. But then you go to the economies of the other bowlers, right? So Ashley Gardner, for the Australians, I should say, Ashley Gardner goes at 8.66. Darcy Brown's 1 over goes for 10, despite the fact that they brought her in after the power play so they could, put fielders out on the boundary for her. Georgie Wareham goes for runs. I mean, we'll get to let's get to the tactics now, because I don't think 100% Australia lost this because of the tactics, right? I don't want to say that because I think that cheapens what South Africa did. But what I would say is the over that Talia McGrath bowled, I don't know, around the 11th, 12th, 13th. How on earth, Behram, you do not bring on Annabelle Sutherland, who is unplayable under lights, for that over, and you bring on a part-timer to bowl cutters? I will truly never understand. Like that for me, I was just sitting there going, are you kidding? This has to be Sutherland. And also they had to bowl Megan Shute earlier, right? They let South Africa get so far ahead of the rate. And I think it's about, I'm going to have to go through this because I want to get all the overs right here. So they bring on, so the 10th over, and then so the 12th over is Wareham, and she gets hit for the 2 boundaries at the end of that over. And then I'm thinking, okay, so they will bring on Annabelle Sutherland or Megan Shute here. Like they have to bring on one of them at this stage, and they don't. And then they bring on Talia McGrath, who bowls 2 wides and goes for a run every ball.
Talia McGrath brings on Talia McGrath.
Yeah, well, yes, you're right. Yeah. And then they bring on Annabelle Sutherland, who goes 1-1-1-1-1 wicket. Right. And at that stage, I would argue I probably would have bowled her straight after Megan Shute's over, which is the 11th. But I certainly would have bowled her after Wareham's over. I certainly would have bowled her after Gardner's over. And you
wouldn't have minded her with the bat either, honestly. Annabelle could have struck a few.
So just from that perspective, I'm just sitting there going, there's some errors there. But let's get to the other side of it, because I do think it is fascinating. I would
just a bit on this though. You're obviously very critical of the tactics, and rightly so. And Talia McGrath, was captaining the side. How much did Australia miss Alyssa Healy? Because she's not only an opening batter, she's also a wicketkeeper and their captain, right? It is a massive void.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just having a look here. Grace Harris makes 3 off 5, doesn't she? And they lost early wickets, didn't they? And then Mooney and McGrath get stuck.
Yeah.
So I suppose there is an alternate world where Healy plays and gets him off to a more exciting start, or gets him off to a more solid start, which allows the others to score quicker. I don't know, but these things. I mean, we just said that Shabnam Ismail and Lizelle Lee and Anne Van Niekerk, if you want, although maybe she's a bit past, but the other two certainly aren't. Like,
absolutely.
South Africa don't have access to good players as well. So,
and Shabnam was the reason why they made the previous T20 World Cup final. She was the one who inspired that team, right? Like, she had phenomenal performances. So, I mean, this was a team in transition. And I obviously missed the second innings, and I think you missed a bit of the first one. But
Jared saw/listened. I was obviously making the other
Jared
stuff,
messaged me, said that this is bigger than Bangladesh, South Africa. And I was like, holy shit, they actually won? Because I didn't catch the second innings. And I saw the score, and Anika Bosch is at 74 unbeaten of 48, and I'm like, holy fuck. You gave me the analogy that she played the Harmanpreet innings. So talk to me a bit about that, because I missed this. Describe it for me. What did she do?
I tell you what, it would be unfair to not mention, Brits getting them off to a decent start as well. So Brits hits a 4 and a 6, and I know she only goes at a run a ball, but she put pressure back on Australia at that point. And and
she had dropped a catch, remember? She dropped a catch and then she caught one right at the end. So her own mental state probably...
Was it the same over, maybe, whatever it was. It was close to each other anyway. No, you're right. And Laura Wolfart played a brilliant shot off Darcy Brown, which I thought was really important. She hit her for 6 back down the ground, I think, which was really important. But so when they lose that wicket, they're 25 for 1. As I said, it's the first ball of Annabelle's over, which is... That's the worst time to lose a wicket to Eccleston or Bumrah or Annabelle Sutherland in this tournament. Like, someone like that is the first ball, because you still have 5 more balls. And, we saw an over where I think it was a run out in it, but there was like 4 wickets in one of her overs. Like, you don't want to get her on a run because, especially under lights, she just seems to be slipping onto the bat so much. So Anika Bosch comes in. Now, this is what I'm going to tell you about her. Her fastest ever innings is a strike rate of 156, right? That was against Sri Lanka earlier this year.
Okay. Yeah, she's been in form.
That was 50 off 32 balls, okay? Her third quickest innings in her career in international women's cricket, 37 innings, her third quickest innings was a strike rate of 137, which was 11 off 8, right?
Wow.
Today... her strike rate was 154. It was the second fastest innings that she's ever played. But I got more for you, right? It was also
I'm listening.
Her highest score before today was 67 against Bangladesh late last year. So there is an uptick in her form, you can see. Today is the highest score that she's ever made. So it's her second fastest score and her highest score in a World Cup semi-final. And on top of that, I haven't been following the internal rumblings of the South African women's team all that much. I've read some of Ferdows's articles, but listening to Ferdows on TalkSport on TMS today, like, Ferdows is like, I thought she should be dropped. Lots of people thought she should be dropped. So this is the woman that they thought should be dropped. But what South Africa wanted was the long batting lineup, and what she did today, Bosch, is play like there was a long batting lineup. Like, you watch her come in this innings, and she is playing almost from ball one in a way where she's like, I've got freedom to hit boundaries here, and that's exactly what she does.
And her numbers reflect that. But you could make a case that exact freedom with which South Africa played, despite having pretty much as deep a batting order as Australia, right? If anything, you could say Australia's is deeper, right? But they played with that freedom, and Australia didn't. So really, that's kind of where they lost it, I suppose.
No, absolutely, no doubt. I mean, so they bat to 8, I think, South Africa. Australia bat to 9, right?
Yes.
And Australia didn't use all of their batting talent. We just talked about the fact that it was funny before. Who was it in the comments when he was saying that Mooney cost them? McGrath's innings was even more bizarre, and then she brought herself on for that over at the wrong time, right? Like, so there's there's no doubt there that there was a fair bit going on. But I thought the interesting one for me, I'm just trying to find it here. Yeah, it's the last over of the power play. So Annabelle Sutherland gets the wicket in the 5th over, and start of the 5th over, but they still do well in that over. But Bosch in the next over sweeps a ball from Molyneux for 4, and then runs down the wicket and knocks another one away from Molyneux, which means that at the end of that power play, they're at 43 for 1, and now they've got someone else who's scored some runs. Yeah. And remember the 6 I was talking about from Laura Wolfart.
And how many has Annabelle bowled up until now, right? That's
also
important. So how many? She'd only bowled 1. Okay.
Yeah, she doesn't. Don't get me started on how much she had disappeared from the bowling lineup. So it's not until the 9th over she comes back on, and I think she goes for about 4 or 5 runs at that stage. Oh, yeah. I think they thought that Darcy Brown might have a similar effect. Which I don't want to have a go at the tactics at that stage, because at that stage they're not massively behind the game. I think South Africa were slight favourites, but having there was a big chance of them being able to do that. But so there's the couple of fours off Molyneux, and then the next over they get the big over of Darcy Brown, and then Bosch doesn't do anything for quite a while, and I can't remember how long it was, but there was a long period where there wasn't a boundary. And then suddenly Bosch goes Bosch. She smashes, I think it was just, I'm just trying to read it here. Yeah, it was a sweep against Wareham. And then she does like a kind of a cow corner slog sweep, heave across the line and hits a 6 next ball. And the game at that stage is just completely broken open. And they now need 5 runs and over. And the thing is, think about who's at the other end, right?
Yeah.
At the other end, you've got Laura Wolfart. Once you get
the best person for this situation, really.
If you get it anywhere near a run a ball at that point, right, you are suddenly at a point with Laura Wolfart so far ahead of the game. So when they needed the 135 or whatever, that was one of my concerns, was if they go through a 10 or 12 ball period without a boundary, and shoot, or Molyneux or whoever, just gets a couple of dot balls in, that rate is going to go up, and then it's really tough. But because Bosch a couple of times just finds multiple boundaries in a row, and that's it, and then eventually the game is just cracked open, right? But by the end it's just completely open, and once they get to that Gardner over, it's essentially game over at that point. And
I mean,
what
was Hypercourse saying? Australia had only conceded 1 6 in the tournament before this game. South Africa hit 3 from 3 different players. So that is a remarkable statistic, really.
Yeah, and
I mean, if you look at the scoreline as well,
right? So the big team's getting knocked out by the other players hitting 6s against them.
And that too was the top order, Kiana and Haley, right? They got dismantled up top over there as well, and the same thing happened over here. So it is essential for any team to have a good power play. Australia slowed down after theirs, but South Africa, if you look at the scoreline in the end, if you go back to my POV, Jarrod has messaged me, we're not doing the other podcast anymore. What happened here? Because for some reason, I always thought Australia would even defend 134. I don't know why, when I left home.
Oh no! I thought they would. No, I think you're right. They were favourites with the market.
And then I see that South Africa have chased 134 down in 17.2 overs, right? So they never really slowed down. They just completely went for it. And I suppose Anika Bosch, with all of her boundary striking, was the perfect foil for Laura Wolfart. And this was clinical. There were no nerves or anything over here. Like, this was just a complete steamroll, really, if you think about it. In Australia, we all did see that they were dropping the odd game and everything, but for them to get knocked out in this fashion also, I think, kind of speaks volumes. And it's brilliant for the game, because I think Hypercost also had this up before. We haven't had a women's T20 final which hasn't featured Australia before, right? Or England.
Sorry,
is it so?
That. What was that?
Yeah, or England. Yeah, that is correct. So that is also kind of amazing for the brand of this tournament, not to mention the teams who will make some more money. And South Africa have a major chance to kind of get that tick mark of winning a World Cup, right? This counts. 100% it does. They lost in the final last time as well, across men and women. This is huge context. They have the most to fight for, because both New Zealand and the West Indies have ICC titles.
If I'm not mistaken, and Hypercourse might need to check this for me, but I think South Africa made the semi-finals or the finals around 2000 in a Women's World Cup. The 2017 World Cup, I was at that game when they got England, 8-9 wickets down, and Anya Shrubsole came in and hit the runs. They obviously played well, I think, at times against Australia in the last final. So, they've put themselves, even in women's cricket, in a position. The difference between women's cricket and men's cricket is quite often they've been the best men's team or the second best men's team. And, I don't think I need to go through that history again. That hasn't been the case for the women. Okay. And this is not that team, right? I mean, right at the moment, even if you knew who the finals was going to be from the other side, South Africa would be the favourites. But they are massively the favourites at the moment, right? Which, of course, is going to terrify every single South African person in the world, but between now and the end of that game. But the point being is they weren't the favourites until about the 12th or 13th over in this game, right? Like, this is a team who we've been talking about them in development. We've been talking about some of the games that they've lost. They didn't play particularly well in Pakistan of recent times. They're not. No one was sitting there going, "This is a team that was going to push." Most people thought Sri Lanka was the team from outside the top three that would be a really interesting one in this tournament. They went home before the tournament was half finished, from what I could tell.
They didn't win a single game, did they? Yeah, they were winless
in their group, right? Yeah,
lost everything.
So Sri Lanka, no, and South Africa's come from nowhere. So I mean, this is already a huge moment for them, and I just hope that they manage to get over. I mean, to be honest, I don't care who wins. All three of these sides, I hope all of them win. But I get your point about South Africa.
I mean, throw in the chasing context to this as well, right? South African semifinals and finals where they have failed to chase down a total versus a quality team. That is another hoodoo that has just been broken today. And I feel like the magnitude of this win is massive. One of the biggest wins we've ever seen in women's cricket ever, right? You think about the West Indies defeating Australia in that final, right? And the West Indies could very well play another final over here. But then what other major moments like those can you even think of, right? Of a team which is slightly underdog and has won something.
Yeah, I mean, the West Indies beating Australia in 2016 was huge, right? I suppose, going back on that. I mean, India beating Australia in the semi-final of 2017 was quite big as well. Yeah. So I suppose we've seen some upsets and everything else, but, we're so used to than everyone else, right? And, the hypercourse thing that he's talking about from before, of the idea of Australia or England not being in a final. That's just not what women's cricket has been about, right?
Yeah.
We play a World Cup and you either have to win against or lose against Australia or England in the final. And
basically,
I just hope that this is, maybe parity is the wrong way of putting it, but I hope this is the beginning of women's cricket's sort of more competitive era, because we know the cricketers are there, right?
Yeah, I mean,
I think it says a lot that Sri Lanka didn't win a game, because they're not that bad, right? I'm not saying they're in good form, because I've watched them play.
They're the Asian champions, right? They won the Asia Cup,
exactly.
So they've clearly had their own moment recently. And if you think about all of these different games that we've seen since the last T20 World Cup in the women's game, have you ever had a series where, it's been a complete blowout by the team you expected to? You haven't. Those ones have been few and far between. And I feel like that is a turning point, definitely, in the women's game. And this semi-final is basically the epitome of it. And it's just massive, like, really. And now we're going to have a new winner. And that on its own is exciting. So everything, from a marketing perspective, this is brilliant.
Yeah, we won't have a new winner if West Indies win, though, will we? We actually, what if you want a new winner, you specifically need New Zealand to win that game, and I think New Zealand are not heavy favourites, but they're certainly favourites going into that one. Last time I had a look at the odds over there for that particular game, I think if you do believe in Deandra Dotton, I think West Indies are about 6 or 7 to 1, maybe 5 to 1 or something like that to win the whole thing at the moment. If you think they're going to win back-to-back games, so.
Oh, I'm on. Am I on? Oh, well, the Multan internet has finally caught up with us, guys. I don't know. I can't see Jarrod. Varun is here. And he's in the audio. I think we should just wrap it up then. Or maybe let me message him. Because how has he left? I dropped off because of the internet for sure. Let me check. All right. Okay, so Jarrod, I think, is super sleepy by this point, and I think he's not going to be coming back. Let's just do the super chats real quick. And I mean, on a closing note, I suppose, on the T20 World Cup final, like whatever it'll be, West Indies or New Zealand, I feel like no one in their right mind would have ever predicted none of Australia, India, and England in the final, right? Like most people would have two of those three teams in their prediction. So it's just, monumental what we've seen. It's historic. And I don't think like we're going to get to see these sort of days in the near future. I expect it in the future. But the fact that it's happened right now kind of makes me optimistic that this will become the norm in women's cricket, and anyone can defeat anyone, as opposed to us always kind of going with our educated predictions. My pick for New Zealand West Indies would be New Zealand. I think Sophie Devine is in a lot of form, and Kiana Joseph and Hayley Matthews are like really good too, but West Indies kind of rely a lot on them. And Deandra Doughton, like she can hit those sixes still. I'm not sure if that can happen 2 games in a row, but maybe they could beat the New Zealand team. Like the White Ferns are my pick, but doesn't mean that they're invincible over here. And yeah, South Africa are probably favorites for the final for me. Anyway, Umang Jain is saying South Africa women defeating Australia women, Park about to win a test match, that too against England, and India about to lose a test match at home. Cricket is alive and running. I know, it's kind of weird, isn't it? Like all of a sudden we have all of these different results which are super unlikely and happening at the same time. Definitely a win for competition. That's what I would say. But anyway, Varun, if you can give me these super chats, we can then wrap this up. We have Amar. He says, Behram, genuine question. You criticize Pakistani reporters for overstepping, asking inappropriate questions to players. Yet you did the same thing to Duckett, couldn't buy a run, yet he scored 60. So I definitely probably could have phrased that better. I'm here to expect that. But what my kind of question was geared towards was that when his initial run came in the team, he wasn't particularly successful and he did struggle versus spin. And then when the Bazball era started, he's gone on to become one of their most important batters, and he was England's best batter in this current game in Multan, right? So I was trying to talk about that transformation. I could have used better verbiage. So yeah, I mean, I can make mistakes too, guys. So I feel like that's what I have to say about that. What's next, Varun? Do we have any super chats? Thanks for watching. All right, I think that will be it. And just a quick reminder, you guys can go to goodareas.co and bookmark that webpage. That can prove to be your one-stop shop for all the work that we do as part of our team, whether it be written content, videos, or podcasts. So we'll be back soon enough because there's lots of stuff happening. Pakistan and England will end. We'll talk about that. New Zealand and India, that test match will end. We'll talk about that. And I mean, if there's time, I really did want to preview Bangladesh, South Africa, because that's an exciting series. Like, I feel like Bangladesh have a solid chance to win it, but then Shakib will not be there. And because of that, I mean, they're going to lose a bowler and a batter. So these things, hopefully we will get to discuss them in another podcast. But that's it. From us. Do leave your predictions for the finalists for the T20 World Cup, the women's one, and whoever you think will win it. Have a good one, guys. That's all for now. Goodbye.
I have a book out with Abhishek Mukherjee, and it is called Overthrowing Cricket's Empire. And it's about the stories of how each team beat England for the first time. We go all the way back to the demon Fred Spofforth getting annoyed at W.G. Grace for acting a little bit like Alex Carey. And then we come all the way to present times with Rashid Khan's England's redemption. We cover every single team to beat England in a major international, but we also talk about the incredible stories, like the barefoot basher from Fiji that almost played for New Zealand. In fact, this book is full of tales like that, like how Pakistan lost a top batter after he was on the run from an angry husband of a movie star he was having an affair with, and also how one future captain of his nation realised he might have to go out and bat at Lords and that he didn't own his own pads. Cricket was used as a tool by the empire, but what happens when those nations grow up and get good at it? Find Overthrowing Cricket's Empire on Amazon today.